The following program deals with a controversial subject. The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation. Viewers are invited to make a judgment based on all available information. This program contains images which may be disturbing to younger or sensitive viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Tonight, on In Search of, Rosalia Lombardo may be the prettiest girl in Palermo, but her lasting beauty remains a mystery. She's been dead for 80 years. And she's just one of the 8,000 catacomb mummies.
Bigfoot, as it's called in the United States, is an animal to fear and dread.
This Oregon psychologist thought Bigfoot was only a legend, until his wife and children strayed into the monster's path.
I was in absolute terror. This thing was about 50 feet from my wife and my children.
Why has this devil taken up residence in a French Catholic church? It's an occult mystery of sex, money, and murder. And you can't ignore these earthquake forecasters. Your life may depend on their predictions. I'm Mitch Pileggi, and this is In Search of. Death rites are among the most sacred traditions in any culture. From the serene to the ghoulish, the treatment of the dead offers a unique glimpse into the soul of the living. For those brave enough to visit one of the most shocking places on earth, there are the catacombs of Palermo, Sicily. Deep underground, you can look 4 centuries of death straight in the face. The secret used to preserve some of the dead in haunting perfection has never been revealed. In search of that secret, we travel to the terrifying lair of the catacomb mummies. This island is still steeped in old world traditions, and the rituals of Sicilian funerals are the same as they have been for generations. The various ways to honor the dead are a part of what makes Sicily unique, from the traditional to the macabre. For underneath this popular vacation spot exists a horrific museum of the dead.
The visual impact that the catacombs offer is indeed immediate and profound, because one comes in direct contact with the dead bodies, which is something that does not happen in regular cemeteries.
The Capuchin catacombs are named after the order of the Capuchin monks, who have guarded this final resting place for more than 5 centuries. Those who descend into the catacombs are overwhelmed by the nightmarish sight of hundreds of dead bodies, dressed in their finery, lining the walls of the dimly lit corridors. Their faces contorted in a chilling variety of ways. Time and gravity have caused some of the corpses to appear as if they are screaming to the living.
We have historical sources telling us that some of the dead spoke to the friars, asking them to pray for their souls.
There are over 8,000 dead inhabiting the Capuchin catacombs. The first person to be displayed here was Brother Silvestro da Gubbio, who died in 1599. Considered a holy man, his fellow monks embalmed da Gubbio so that the congregation could pray to him after his death. What began as a tomb for the Capuchin Brotherhood in the 16th century later became an exclusive burial place for wealthy citizens, war heroes, and prominent artisans. To be mummified within the catacombs became a status symbol. Little is known about the life of Bartolomeo Mena, but in death his unusual size and broad shoulders has earned him the nickname of the Giant. Even though French Colonel Enya di Giuliano died in 1848, his French Bourbon uniform is preserved to this day. American Vice Consul Giovanni Patroniti passed away in 1911 and is also immortalized here. A corridor of the Virgins was specially reserved for unmarried women, whose virtue was revered. Here the maidens lie in open coffins, elegantly clad in colorful dresses. Delicate lace bonnets eerily frame their exposed skulls. Originally, corpses were simply placed in the Mediterranean sun to dry naturally. But later, the monks began to experiment with chemicals to find better ways to preserve the dead.
Il processo poi che qualche volta fu usato.
One method for preserving the bodies was to immerse them in an arsenic bath. This way the dead person retained all of his or her features, even skin tone, hair and beards.
I capelli, la barba.
Arsenic, a deadly poison, proved to be a very effective embalming agent, preserving the dead to a remarkable degree and allowing relatives of the deceased a better chance to relive their memories.
È chiaro che lì si consumava.
In this place one could witness the greatest dramas of life, the joys and the sorrows of the living, the fond remembrance of lost loved ones, especially those who had been taken from life much too soon. The greatest emotion was and is still created by the little girl, Rosalia Lombardo.
The preservation of Rosalia Lombardo is the Capuchin's crowning achievement. Her tiny body lies in a special children's chapel. In 1920, little Rosalia was only 2 years old when she died. She was the first child of a Sicilian family and was naturally adored by her parents. Her death at such a tender young age was a heartbreaking tragedy in the community. An eminent local physician, Dr. Solafia, experimented with a unique embalming method based on a secret combination of chemicals that were injected into the lifeless body of the child. The results were remarkable.
La bambina.
It's as if in her face were summed up the entire drama of human existence, our desire for life that is sooner or later cut down by the unavoidable law of death.
Rosalia's family must have felt a great deal of comfort mixed with sadness in visiting their daughter in the catacombs. A family tradition began when the Lombardos brought Rosalia's sister to the catacombs to pay her respects. She would continue to visit throughout her life, and while she naturally aged, her older sister Rosalia remained frozen in time, looking exactly the same today as she did more than 80 years ago. For reasons known only to him, Dr. Solafia took the secret of his embalming method to his grave.
Si sa semplicemente che era.
We don't know much about the method used to preserve her body, except that it involved chemicals and herbs. You can see on her body the ointments used, which kept her flesh moist and perfectly preserved her every feature, even her hair and her skin tone.
There is some speculation that after his success with Rosalia, Dr. Solafia shared some of his expertise with the team of Russians responsible for embalming their leader Lenin with equally lifelike results. This is what Rosalia should look like after being ravished by time and the elements. But instead, for nearly a century, she gives onlookers the illusion that she is only taking a momentary rest. This unusual burial place was written about by an Italian poet, Ippolito Pindamonte, who visited in 1777.
Wide, dark, underground rooms where bodies without soul still go around, dressed as they were when they died. Their ancient features, their flesh, and even their faces are kept after 100 years or more. Death looks at them and fears she has failed in her aim.
There is certainly nothing attractive about death, but it is the terror and the unease which death inspires that draws people to the Capuchin catacombs. Long after the rest of us have returned to the soil, this testament to the mysterious skills of a simple Sicilian doctor will live on as the sleeping beauty of Palermo. Coming up, what secret could be so shocking that it would drive a priest into the arms of the devil?
It was something incredibly shattering to his own belief system.
And earthquake predictors sound the alarm.
I've made more than 400 predictions and hit more than 300 of them.
But first, it's man against monster when we go hunting for Bigfoot.
Oh, there he goes.
Imagine this. You're out in the woods on a picnic with your family when a strange howl splits the silence. You're in Bigfoot country, and there's no one to protect you. For Dr. Matthew Johnson, this scenario was all too real. Like most of us, he thought this man-beast lived only in legend until he came face to face with the 9-foot monster that left this footprint.
We were totally unaware of what this animal was like, what it would do, what it was capable of.
Bigfoot, as it's called in the United States, is an animal to fear and dread.
My body slammed immediately into the fight or flight response mode.
Oh, there he goes.
Powerful, intelligent, and skilled at survival, the creature bears the name Bigfoot. Stories of violence and death sometimes follow its appearance. Other reports say its true nature is kind and peaceful. It is a fact that real or imagined sightings have occurred thousands of times in the past 150 years. But the nature of Bigfoot remains a mystery. It might be a primitive human or a throwback survivor of an animal species long thought extinct. In recent years, there have been hundreds of sightings of a creature that fits its description, centered in the thickly wooded landscape of the Pacific Northwest.
There are things out here in this world that we don't understand, and if we think we know it all, I think we're practicing arrogance as a human species.
Dr. Matthew Johnson is a licensed clinical psychologist with a private practice in Grants Pass, Oregon. He has risked public ridicule to share his amazing story. On July 1st, 2000, Dr. Johnson, his wife Rochelle, and their 3 children were enjoying a long hike along a remote wilderness trail near the Oregon Caves.
We hiked up the mountain about a mile, and we came across a stretch about 50 to 100 feet on the trail where we were downwind of something that smelled horrible, and we didn't talk about it. In my mind, I thought, well, I wonder if this is a skunk.
So we kept going probably another 10 or 15 minutes, and we started hearing this noise. In my mind, I kept going over and over, what could this be?
So we kept walking along the trail, and this sound continued, and we all stopped, and I looked at my wife and kids, and I said, did you guys just hear what I heard? And they nodded their heads and said, yes.
We kept going a little bit further, and Matt needed to stop. He was feeling a need to use the bushes. So he went up there, and while he was doing that, we just were kind of looking on the trail and finding different bugs running around, which we often do when we're hiking.
I was scanning the trees from my right to my left, and all of a sudden I caught movement out of the left corner of my eye, and I turned my head, and I saw Bigfoot walking from one tree to another. It took about 2 seconds. peeked its head out from behind the tree, and it was watching my wife and kids down on the path over here. Everything I knew about the outdoors came crashing down, and I was in absolute terror. This thing was about 50 feet from my wife and my children, and my protective instincts kicked in. I ran down to the trail, and just said, let's go now. Everything happened so fast, but if you watch some of those movies where something really traumatic is happening, it goes so slow. What I saw was approximately 8 to 9 feet tall. It walked with large strides, swinging its arms. I sat the kids down, gave them some water out of the backpack, pulled my wife aside and said, "You're not going to believe what I saw, but I saw a Bigfoot." She said, "I believe you."
It all made sense because of the smell, because of the sound that we'd heard, and it was so unusual. And I think just if it had just been Matt and I, it would have been different. We would have probably panicked more, actually, because we had to stay calm and not frighten the kids, although we were, very scared.
The Sasquatch, or Bigfoot as it's called in the United States, is an animal to fear and dread.
Tom Steenberg has spent the past 21 years on a self-proclaimed quest for the undeniable proof of the existence of Bigfoot.
Since the turn of the century, I know of no account where someone has reported actually being attacked by one. However, it is an animal, and all animals are really unpredictable. And we do have people who disappear in wilderness areas every year, and I tend to believe if you ran into a hostile Sasquatch, you would tend to disappear.
While many believe that Bigfoot roams the Pacific Northwest, there is still debate as to the origin and species of the creature.
The whole idea that Bigfoot is a missing link is really wrong-headed.
Lauren Coleman is a leading cryptozoologist. His field of study is hidden and mysterious animals.
These creatures were here at the same time we were. They probably evolved from different kinds of apes than we did. And so there's a parallel evolution going on here. We're cousins. We're not direct descendants of Bigfoot. There are various theories. One is that Paranthropus, a robust, sort of anthropoid-type humanoid, existed and still exists today. Some people, though, think that it was Gigantopithecus, which is a giant ape from the Himalayas, from India, that migrated across the Bering Straits and is into the United States and Canada.
Most experts who study Bigfoot do so from a distance, by examining footprints and fossil records. But there are Bigfoot trackers who will put themselves in harm's way, and Paul Freeman is a legend amongst them. He has captured astonishing video evidence of his encounter with Bigfoot in the northwest corner of Oregon.
That one particular morning, I got in there real late, and there was their tracks in the mud where they'd been drinking water.
It was August 20th, 1992, and Paul was finding footprints, dozens of them, all over Deduct Creek.
Yeah, it looks like they've been here. Looks like it's pretty fresh. Go around this bush here. Oh, he's come down and went back up both.
Paul Freeman knew he was close.
Up this old trail. Can't see much up through here. Gotta be tracks here somewhere in this road. Look at that. I hear the brush popping and stuff. Oh, there he goes. Hear my heart beating 40 miles an hour.
The images that Paul Freeman had captured that day on videotape set the scientific world on fire. Dr. Jeff Meldrum is an associate professor of anatomy at Idaho State University.
Here's some of the reasons I think this video is worthy of further consideration. One of the things is the proportions of the arms. We can see here as the arm swings back that the forearm is really quite long, disproportionately long, which suggests it's not just simply a man in a fur costume. And in fact, the way in which the head sits upon the shoulders is not very human looking.
Dr. Meldrum's area of expertise is foot anatomy, and he has done extensive research on the tracks believed to have been left by Bigfoot.
Most impressive to me is this set of 7 casts from a single incident that I experienced firsthand and cast these myself. And they show a variety, show the variation that can appear in the footprints from a full, rather passive footprint, the toes clearly visible, to much deeper impressions as the animal was running down across a fallow field. I remember the first time looking at the long line of footprints in the ground and realizing those features. Literally the hair sort of stood up on the back of my neck because I realized that in all likelihood an animal walked right past here that we don't fully comprehend or recognize.
Even with today's modern forensic science, the proof of Bigfoot's existence will be left up to the hunters.
Well, the only type of evidence that will be accepted by the scientific community is hard physical evidence, and what they mean by that is they need a body or piece of the body. Nothing else will do.
I'd like for somebody to find a skeleton. I'd like for somebody to find a dead body. My theory is that Bigfoot will be discovered when a lumber truck hits it, and that then we'll know it's real.
Could I shoot one if I had one of my rifle sights? I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I don't even know if I actually saw one. Even after all this time, I would believe my eyes. I mean, 7, 8 foot, hair-covered man-like creature in her own backyard, mind-boggling. Would I shoot it? In order to get the evidence, in order to prove this animal exists, you'd have to.
Until such proof is brought forth, Bigfoot remains a threat, and the evidence of its existence should serve as a warning to those who venture into the vast wilderness. Later, on In Search Of, can deadly quakes be predicted?
What would you do? Would you go to school? Would you go to work? Would you keep your kids home?
Brace yourself for this earth-shaking story. But first, a priest's shocking discovery hurtles him into the world of the occult when we come back. The life of a humble priest mysteriously changes. Suddenly, wealthy beyond words, he plunges into the occult and a dark world of secret societies and murder. The strange monuments he built in life and his cryptic final confession spark controversy to this day. In search of his secret, we travel to a bizarre church.
I'm in Rennes-le-Château, France, in one of the oddest churches in Europe, perhaps the world.
Boyd Rice is an author and researcher into the mystery of Rennes-le-Château.
At the end of the 19th century, there was a parish priest named Berger-Saunier who was redecorating his church here, and he made a discovery in this Visigothic pillar.
While working in the church, Saunier removed a crumbling piece of the altar, discovering a secret compartment that contained parchments.
Whatever Saunier discovered here was something very shocking.
It was something incredibly shattering to his own belief system as a man who had been raised a devout Catholic and trained for the priesthood.
And in those days, of course, they had to keep this information so secret because otherwise they would be killed.
Many experts believe that the papers contain shocking proof that Jesus Christ did not die on the cross, a notion blasphemous to most Christians. The young priest took his discovery to church authorities in Paris. When he returned, he said nothing of the parchments or their possible meaning. However, he began spending enormous amounts of money, the source of which was unknown.
virtually overnight, he began living in a very kingly fashion. He spent millions of dollars building the buildings around here, redecorating the chapel.
It's my belief that he was paid off by the Catholic Church. The secret was so important that the Catholic Church actually paid a huge amount of money to keep him quiet.
Was Saunier blackmailing the church with information that could ultimately destroy it? According to some, his bizarre renovations to the church indicate that this may be true. The last of the Stations of the Cross shows the traditional image of Christ's body being put into the tomb. But there is a full moon in the painting, and the Gospels state that Christ was put into the tomb during the day.
And why does it depict this scene happening in the middle of the night? Is it that someone is spiriting Jesus' body out of the tomb because he in fact is not dead yet?
If Jesus Christ did not die on the cross, the key to what he did with the rest of his life lies in the figure of Mary Magdalene. She was a devoted follower of Christ, but some believe they may have had a more intimate relationship.
Many people believe that Mary Magdalene came here to the Languedoc region of France and had a dynasty of kings who were the offspring of Christ. These people became kings throughout Europe. They became monarchs of the world.
If his bloodline existed today, well, wouldn't that be the real authority, the real Christian church? So, presumably there would have been a rivalry between the two.
Some researchers believe that these descendants of Christ ruled Europe for 1,000 years, until the Catholic Church succeeded in a campaign to eliminate them from power. If the Catholic Church had purchased Saunier's silence about the line of kings descended from Christ, the priest's next renovation seems to be a calculated attempt to offend the Church. According to Boyd Rice, this very strange statue beside the main altar projects the image of Christ as a father, holding his own baby, suggesting that this child was the beginning of his royal dynasty.
He knew that it was too much for people at that time to understand. He was playing a game where people in the future, with more open minds, could click into the symbolism.
The secret that Saunier kept hidden seemed to undermine his faith. When we come back, Father Saunier plunges into the world of the occult.
This program contains images which may be disturbing to younger or sensitive viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
A French priest finds an ancient scroll hidden in this church. What was the shocking truth behind his discovery? Had Jesus Christ survived the crucifixion and fathered a royal dynasty? It seems that Father Béranger Saunier's discovery led him to lose his faith, and he began to deny his priestly vows by immersing himself in the occult.
If he found evidence that Jesus didn't die on the cross, or that he was married to Mary Magdalene and had children, you could see where this would rock his world. It could be he went through some sort of spiritual crisis, and these occult groups take advantage.
It is believed that Saunier is initiated into the occult group, and that soon after, he takes another critical step in his journey towards scandal and blasphemy.
He starts having a relationship, even though he's a priest, he starts having a probably sexual relationship with this opera singer named Emma Calvé, who was very, very famous at the time and also a member of these occult groups.
Saunier soon commissions bizarre renovations that may reflect Emma Calvé's influence and his involvement with the black arts. A grotesque demon with bulging eyes, devil horns, and a horrified expression is installed by Saunier to stand guard at the entrance of the church.
And he also inscribed in Latin over the entrance the Latin words for "this place is terrible," which seems an odd thing for a priest to put on the entrance to his own church.
Some accounts indicate that Saunier's descent into decadence is rapid. He constructs the Via Betania, a lavish private residence where he enjoys frequent visits from the intoxicating Emma Calvé. She continues to weave her irresistible occult spell. Saunier's vow of chastity is now a memory. Saunier begins to host wild parties. It's here that Saunier possibly meets with the living descendants of Jesus Christ. Many believe that the occult societies were hiding and protecting these royal heirs as they waited for their chance to rule once again. The atmosphere around Rennes-le-Château begins to turn ominous. Father Antoine Gélis was one of Saunier's closest associates. Some believe that relations between the priests had become strained. On All Saints' Eve, November 1st, 1897, Father Gélis was reading in his room when he was attacked with an axe and brutally murdered. In a ritual practice common to those trained by the church, the assassin folded the dead priest's arms across his chest. A veil of suspicion fell over Saunier. The murder would remain unsolved. After the murder of Father Gélis, Saunier begins to spend more time alone, and he builds one of his last projects. On the edge of a cliff, he constructs the Tower of Magdalen. And it is in this tower on the 17th of January, 1917, that Saunier is paid a visit by two strangers. Hours later, he is found unconscious on the floor. Doctors called it a stroke. Oddly enough, the church housekeeper had ordered a coffin for him the week prior. Fearing that the end is near, Saunier asked that an old friend, Father Rivière, give him the last rites and hear his confession. Father Rivière was shocked at what was revealed and refused to grant his friend absolution. 2 days later, Father Béranger Saunier passes from the mortal realm and is later buried on the grounds at Rennes-le-Château. What did Saunier confess on his deathbed that so horrified Father Rivière? Was it Saunier's blasphemous involvement with the occult? Did Saunier admit knowledge of the heinous and barbaric murder of fellow priest Antoine Gélis? Or did Saunier shake Father Rivière's faith by sharing the secret that led Saunier down his own dark path? When Béranger Saunier slipped into the deathly silence of the grave, he left no answers, only clues that continue to haunt many whom are in search of the mystery of Rennes-le-Château. Next on In Search Of, imagine knowing where and when the next killer earthquake will strike. What these experts have uncovered could save thousands of lives. In under a minute, a large earthquake can wreak more destruction than a hurricane or flood. Even a moment's notice could spell the difference between life and death. But there is no way to predict when the next seismic catastrophe will strike. Or is there? Some people claim that their warnings have been kept under wraps.
I think that people are afraid of panicking people. Who knows how people would react? What would you do? Would you go to school? Would you go to work? Would you keep your kids home? Would you keep your husband or your wife home?
In the last 26 years, I've made more than 400 predictions and hit more than 300 of them.
Earthquakes strike with fatal and devastating force. Recently, the world has watched in horror as over 18,000 people died in India as the result of a calamitous 7.7 earthquake. In Turkey, entire cities were leveled, as more than 17,000 people perished beneath the rubble of a 7.4 earthquake. Able to strike at any time and anywhere, the unpredictability of earthquakes leaves us all vulnerable.
People should understand that they are not going to know when earthquakes are going to happen.
David Jackson is the former science director for the Southern California Earthquake Center.
Earthquakes can't be predicted because they're way too complex. They result from a lot of forces that vary from one place to another. We can't measure these forces in detail because earthquakes occur at a depth of 5 to 10 miles below the surface of the Earth.
Like David Jackson, geologist Jim Birkeland once believed that earthquake prediction was impossible until he made a startling observation.
We had the three major tide-raising forces occurring almost simultaneously, lining up with the sun, moon, and earth, nearness of the moon, and nearness of the sun. So it just popped into my head at that point. Perhaps the solid earth is also being pulled out by this gravitational stress. Well, 2 days later, we got a 4.4 quake. And I thought, my, this is simple. What is so tough about predicting quakes?
In 1989, Birkeland made a series of very troubling observations.
Not only do we have the highest tides in 3 years, we have animals doing very, very strange things in the Bay Area. Never before had live beaked whales washed up on the beaches here. So I had called the paper 4 days before the World Series quake and said, it's going to be worse than I thought.
Corner of Jefferson and Divisadero.
The downtown section of Santa Cruz is basically gone.
You can see this building is collapsed.
Right at the end of the cantilever is where the roadway dropped onto the lower deck.
Jim Birkeland's dire prediction was ignored by the scientific community. A massive 7.1 earthquake hit San Francisco, causing billions of dollars in damage. Motorists were trapped beneath collapsed freeways, and lives were lost in the tragedy. One week after predicting the San Francisco earthquake, Birkeland was suspended from his job as county geologist and warned not to make any more predictions.
They've called me a clown, a crackpot, an enthusiast, not a scientist. And I says, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I believe in it. It's helping people.
Using his method of studying the tides, moon, and gravitational forces, Jim Birkeland claims to have successfully predicted over 300 earthquakes. Professional screenwriter Kathy Gorey is another person with demonstrated abilities to predict the coming of earthquakes. But unlike Jim Birkeland, she is not looking for signals. They come to her, whether she likes it or not.
I get a headache before an earthquake. The headache is centered right in the frontal lobe. That's how I can tell. I don't normally get headaches. I don't have migraines. I'm not someone with a history of headaches, so that's how I noticed this. I would have a headache. It would last for however long it lasted, correlated with the magnitude of the quake. Then after the end of the headache, within usually a few hours, maybe up to 24, 48 hours, there would be an earthquake.
On January 14th, 1994, Gorey began to experience an excruciating headache that would not subside.
I was complaining about the headache. I was joking because we had a lot of pressure on us to finish a script. We were supposed to turn the script in the next day. I said, oh, this is giving me such a headache. And one of my friends said, maybe, have you ever thought it might be one of your earthquake headaches?
Within hours, Kathy and her friends were jolted out of their beds by the devastating earthquake that leveled parts of Northridge, California, and set portions of the city of Los Angeles on fire. Kathy Gorey attributes her headache to a mineral called magnetite.
We know that animals behave strangely before a quake. Their navigation systems are off. And it's due to the fact that the magnetite in their brains is sensitive to the electromagnetic waves that are being released. And for a long time, they thought human beings didn't have magnetite in their brains. And about 10 years ago, there was an article in Time magazine showing that, lo and behold, yes, We do. We do have magnetite. All humans have it, and it's centered in the frontal lobe of the brain.
Kathy Gorey may be living proof that certain people, like animals, can tune into the Earth's subtle changes to forecast an impending earthquake. But the surest way to predict earthquakes may be the most bizarre method of all. You won't believe how this scientist makes his predictions. We'll show you when we come back. While most government agencies believe that earthquake prediction is not possible, there are those who disagree, claiming that their abilities to forecast earthquakes could save countless lives. Scientist Zhonghao Xiao is among them. After over a decade of research, Xiao has refined his methods and claims an astonishing rate of accuracy. His secret is in the clouds.
Every day I spend observing satellite photographs, looking for earthquake clouds that appear suddenly. These clouds are different from weather clouds because they are formed by water vapor that is emitted from the Earth. This vapor condenses into an earthquake cloud, which looks like a very long, thin line, or several parallel radiating lines.
Recently, a series of troubling earthquake clouds began appearing in the skies above the American Northwest. The unusual formations prompted Zhonghao Xiao to post an internet warning.
On February 26th of this year, I found a sign that there would be an earthquake of magnitude greater than 5 in the Seattle area.
Zhonghao Xiao was right. A mere 40 hours after his startling prediction, Seattle, Washington was rocked by a magnitude 6.8 earthquake. When the dust settled, many were amazed that Zhonghao Xiao had been able to predict a massive earthquake for an area of the United States that hadn't experienced one in almost 40 years. The scientist always registers his predictions with the United States Geological Survey. Their own records indicate that Zhonghao Xiao has been right almost 30% of the time. Yet they are still unwilling to admit that earthquake prediction is possible.
Then on the 20th of
Even
March,
if authorities could predict earthquakes, some still wonder if they would release their information.
I think that people are afraid of panicking people. You don't want to have War of the Worlds or some kind of crazy thing happening.
I think seismologists are scared of predicting earthquakes because of the huge responsibility they would have to bear.
3 people with nothing in common but an uncanny ability to defy the critics who still insist that earthquake prediction is a mere matter of coincidence.
Every time there seems to be a correlation, the critics come out and say, coincidence, but when it keeps happening time after time over 26 years, it's more than coincidence.
Are we truly helpless in the face of this terrifying power? Or can the emerging science of earthquake prediction provide warning and defense against the next cataclysm? The truth remains elusive. Until we have answers, our very survival depends on chance, readiness, and a future as uncertain as the ground beneath our feet. Thanks for watching In Search Of. I'm Mitch Pileggi. Good night.